time has expired. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would just point out to my friend from Tennessee, it's not that I believe the DOJ has the ability to use the FACE Act to prosecute people who vandalize and attack crisis pregnancy centers. They've said it. The Department of Justice says they can do that. I'm just asking why they haven't. With that, I yield to my good friend from Alabama 1 minute. We've had now dozens of whistleblowers come talk to House Republican staff on the Judiciary Committee. In fact, one of them is testifying in a transcribed interview as we speak, talking about how the Justice Department is now operating in such a political fashion and manner. Second, you all know about the Twitter files, where we have learned that big tech, big government are colluding to keep information from we the people. The most egregious example took place prior to the 2020 presidential election, where they kept that information from the country just days and weeks before the most important election we have, suppressing a story and limiting Americans' free speech rights. And then finally, third, when I think about the accountability that we plan to bring to this administration, I just think in the broad sense. I mean, everything has gotten worse. In 2 years' time, we went from a secure border to no border. We went from safe streets to record crime. We went from stable prices to record inflation. And of course, as I've said, we have a government that now, I believe, is targeting the very people it is supposed to serve. So we plan on, as a Republican majority, holding them accountable and dealing with what we have seen. And again, what has been exposed from the Twitter files and, of course, what these brave FBI agents who've come to us now as whistleblowers and told us how the Justice Department is operating and how it is not supposed to be functioning in that manner, because it is supposed to be equal treatment under the law in this great country. I now want to turn it over to the Majority Whip, the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Emmer.
Chair now recognizes himself for an opening statement. The fix is in. Even with the face-saving indictment last week of Hunter Biden, everyone knows the fix is in. 4.5 years. 4.5 years the Department of Justice has been investigating Mr. Biden, an investigation run by David Weiss, an investigation that limited the number of witnesses agents could interview, an investigation that prohibited agents from referring to the president as the, quote, big guy in any of the interviews they did get to do, an investigation that curtailed attempts to interview Mr. Biden by giving the transit team secret a heads up, an investigation that notified Mr. Biden's defense counsel about a pending search warrant, an investigation run by Mr. Weiss, where they told the Congress 3 different stories in 33 days. They told this committee on June 7th, David Weiss said, I have ultimate authority to determine when, where, and whether to bring charges. 23 days later, June 30th, he told this committee, actually, I can only bring charges in my U.S. Attorney's District, the District of Delaware. And then to further confuse matters, on July 10th, he told Senator Graham, I have not sought special counsel status. Rather, I've had discussions with the Department of Justice. An investigation run by Mr. Weiss that negotiated a plea deal that the federal district court declined to accept. A plea deal so ridiculous, the judge asked this question, quote, is there any precedence for agreeing not to prosecute crimes that have nothing to do with the charges being diverted? The response from the DOJ lawyer, I'm not aware of any, Your Honor. A plea deal so ridiculous that the judge also asked, have you ever seen a diversion agreement where the agreement not to prosecute was so broad that it encompasses crimes in a different case? The response from the DOJ lawyer, no, Your Honor, we haven't. An investigation run by Mr. Weiss that not only had a sweetheart deal rejected, but according to the New York Times, there was an even sweeter deal, an earlier deal, a deal in which Mr. Biden would not have to plead guilty to anything. 4.5 years and all that, and now we get a special counsel. Now we get a special counsel, and who does the Attorney General pick? David Weiss, the guy who let all that happen. He could have selected anyone. He could have picked anyone inside government, outside government. He could have picked former attorney generals, former special counsels, but he picks the one guy he knows will protect Joe Biden. He picks David Weiss. And here's what the AG said in his August 11th announcement of David Weiss as the special counsel. Quote, I am confident that Mr. Weiss will carry out his responsibility in an even-handed and urgent manner. Urgent manner? Every witness we've talked to, the two FBI whistleblowers that came forward, Mr. Shapley, Mr. Ziegler, the two FBI agents on the case, Mr. Sobosinski, Ms. Hawley, they've all said this thing was anything but urgent. The FBI said they were frustrated at the pace. Ms. Hawley said she was frustrated at the pace. And of course, the IRS agents, they said the investigation was slow-walked and even-handed. They limited the number of witnesses that could be interviewed. They tipped off the defense counsel about a subpoena. The judge says the plea deal was a joke. And all that's just half the story. There's one investigation protecting President Biden. There's another one attacking President Trump. Justice Department's got both sides of the equation covered. Look at the classified documents case. Spring and early summer of last year, the Department of Justice asked President Trump to turn over boxes of documents. He does just that. In the process, President Trump finds 38 additional documents. He tells the Department of Justice, the very next day the FBI comes to his home and he turns them over. Then the Department of Justice asked the president to put any boxes he brought from the White House to his home in his storage room and secure it by locking it. He does that as well. Everything they asked him to do, he did. And then what's the Justice Department do? August 8th, last year, they raid President Trump's home. And according to the FBI agent, Stephen D'Antuono, the assistant director in charge of the Washington field office, the search was a complete departure from standard protocol. When we interviewed Mr. D'Antuono, he said, first, the Miami field office didn't do the search. Instead, they sent folks from D.C. He said there was no U.S. attorney assigned to the case. Instead, it was run by D.C., in particular Jay Bratt, who's now on the special counsel team. He said the FBI didn't get President Trump's counsel's approval before they did the search. And then Mr. D'Antuono told us he had recommended that when the FBI got to Mr. Trump's home, President Trump's home, they contact his counsel, wait for him to get there and do the search together. Of course, the DOJ said no. And then who does the Attorney General name as special counsel in that case? Jack Smith. The guy who a few years ago was looking for ways to prosecute Americans, targeted by Lois Lerner and the IRS, looking to prosecute the very victims of the weaponized government, the weaponized IRS. Jack Smith, the guy who prosecuted Governor McDonald, only to have the Supreme Court overturn that prosecution in a unanimous decision. That's the guy that the Attorney General of the United States selects as special counsel. And you wonder why 4 out of 5 Americans believe there are now 2 standards of justice in our great country. Mr. Garland, I anticipate a number of questions on these 2 investigations. Later in the hearing, I expect from Republicans you will also get questions about the many other concerns the American people have with the department. The school board's memorandum, treating Catholics, the memo that said pro-life Catholics are extremists, the Fifth Circuit decision, great decision, on the Department of Justice and other agencies censoring American speech, and of course the FISA law that's up for reauthorization this year, and how that process has been abused and infringed on the rights, the privacy rights of the American people. Americans believe that today in our country, there is unequal application of the law. They believe that because there is. Republicans are committed to making that.
Mr. Weiss was
Joe Biden decided to keep David Weiss as U.S. attorney. You weren't sworn in until March. He was told he was going to stay on in February. Pretty fundamental question. Who decided David Weiss was going to stay as U.S. attorney in Delaware?
Mr. Weiss,
your time has expired.
Mr. Chairman, your time has expired.
I'm waiting for an answer, and then I'll yield.
Well, you asked the question after your time had expired already. Point of order.
Gentleman can respond, then I'll go to Ms. Jackson Lee.
Mr. Weiss was the special U.S. attorney from the District of Delaware when I came on. He had been appointed by President Trump. I promised that he would be permitted to stay on for this investigation, and that is what happened.
Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I believe you misquoted from the transcript of the Senate hearing. I therefore ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the entire transcript of the Senate hearing.
Without objection, but I didn't misquote what Mr. Garland said. Ms. Jackson Lee from Texas, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my time, the Chairman.
Mr. Garland, what changed On July 10th, 2023, David Weiss wrote Senator Graham and said, I have not requested special counsel designation. August 11th, you announced that he's now the special counsel. What happened in that 31 days?
As I said publicly several days before my announcement, I think 3 days, Mr. Weiss had asked to become special counsel. He explained that he had reached the stage of his investigation where he thought that appropriate.
What stage is that?
I had promised to give him the resources he needed.
What stage is that? He'd reached the stage. After 5 years, what stage are we in? We in the beginning stage, the middle stage, the end stage, the keep hiding the ball stage? What stage are we in?
I think this one I would go back to the videotape where I said I'm not permitted to discuss ongoing investigation.
Well, isn't that convenient? Something changed in 31 to 32 days from July 10th to August 11th. I think it's too brave. Whistleblowers came forward and a judge called BS on the plea deal. You guys tried to get past them. That's what I think happened. The chair now recognizes the gentleman.
I'll yield to the chairman.
I appreciate the gentleman yielding. Mr. Garland, have you or are you investigating who leaked the information that appeared in the Washington Post on October 6, 2022 about this investigation, about the Hunter Biden investigation?
You're saying there was an October 2022...
October 6, 2022, Washington Post writes a story about the Hunter Biden investigation. I wonder, have you investigated who leaked that information to the Washington Post?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Has it been referred to the Inspector General? Do you know that?
I don't want my answer to suggest that there is or isn't such an investigation. I know that the Inspector General sent a letter to Congress explaining that he had an ongoing assessment with respect to the whistleblower's charges. I don't know if that's what you're referring to.
Time the gentleman's expired. Does not recognize himself. Quote, Mr. Weiss has full authority to bring cases in other jurisdictions if he feels it's necessary. That was your response, Attorney General, to Senator Grassley's question on March 1st, 2023. You just referenced it when Mr. Bishop was questioning you. Only problem is he'd already been turned down by the U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia, Mr. Graves. So he didn't have full authority, did he?
I had an extended conversation with Senator Grassley at the time. We briefly touched on the Section 515 question and how that process went. I've never been suggested...
My point's real simple, Mr. Garland. You said he had complete authority, but he'd already been turned down. He wanted to bring an action in the District of Columbia, and the U.S. Attorney there said, no, you can't. And then you go tell the United States Senate under oath that he has complete authority.
I'm going to say again that no one had the authority to turn him down. They could refuse to partner with him. They could not...
You can use whatever language. Refuse to partner is turning down.
Well, it's not the same under a well-known Justice Department practice.
Here's why the statute of limitations question is important, and Mr. Bishop was getting at just a few minutes ago. Here's why it's important. You let the statute of limitations lapse for 2014, 2015. Those were the years with the felony tax charges where Hunter Biden was getting income from Burisma. Here are 4 facts that I think are so important. Hunter Biden was put on the board of Burisma, made a lot of money, got paid a lot of money over those years. Couple $1 million. He wasn't qualified. Fact number 2, he wasn't qualified to be on the board of Burisma. Not my words, his words. He said he got on the board because of his last name. The brand, as Devin Archer said when he was under oath and we deposed him. Fact number 3, Burisma executives told Hunter Biden, we're under pressure, we need help. Fact number 4, Joe Biden goes to Ukraine, leverages our tax money, American people's tax money, to get the prosecutor fired who was applying the pressure. Interestingly enough, that fact is entirely consistent with what the confidential human source told the FBI, and they recorded in the 1023 form, the same form Mr. Wray didn't want to let this committee and the Congress see. That all happened. That all happened. And what I'm wondering is why you guys let the statute of limitations lapse for those tax years that dealt with Burisma income.
There's one more fact that's important, and that is that this investigation was being conducted by Mr. Weiss, an appointee of President Trump. You will, at the appropriate time, have the opportunity to ask Mr. Weiss that question, and he will no doubt address it in the public report that will be transmitted to the Congress. I don't know the answer to those questions.
Did the lawyers just like let it, did they just like, oh, darn, we let it, were they careless?
I expect that won't be what he says, but because I
You
promised...
know that's not the case, because as Mr. Bishop pointed out, they had a tolling agreement. They talked to Hunter Biden's defense counsel and say, let's extend the statute of limitations. And then at some point, they made an intentional decision to say, we're going to let the statute of limitations lapse. And I want to know who decided that and why they did it.
Mr. Weiss was a supervisor of the investigation at that time and at all times. He made the appropriate decisions, and you'll be able to ask him that question, and he will.
You know why they did it? Everyone knows why they did it. May not say it, but everyone knows why they did it. They didn't, those tax years, that dealt with that involved the president. It's one thing to have a gun charge in Delaware. That doesn't involve the president of the United States. But Burisma, oh my, that goes right to the White House. We can't have that. And we can slow walk this thing along. We can even extend the statute of limitations, and then we can intentionally let it lapse. And we know this investigation was slow. Here's what everyone said. Shapley said, DOJ slow walked the investigation. Ziegler, slow walking in the approvals of everything. This happened at the Delaware's attorney's office and DOJ tax level. Mr. Sobocinski, the FBI agent, said, I would have liked to see things move faster. Ms. Hawley said the same. Every witness we've talked to said this thing was slow walked, and we know why. They slow walked it long enough to let the statute of limitations run so they wouldn't have to get into Burisma. Tell me where I'm wrong.
Will the gentleman yield?
No, I'm asking Mr. Garland the
I
question.
think I've tried to make clear that I don't know the specifics of the investigation. Much of what you are describing occurred during the Trump administration, during a Justice Department appointed by President Trump.
No, it didn't. This is 4.5 years, this investigation. We're talking about the last few years. Your statement was just this year, March 1st, to Senator Grassley.
No, I'm sorry. I was trying to respond to your descriptions of what the IRS agents said about certain things.
Statute of limitations is 6 years. That lapsed here in the Biden administration.
On the statute of limitations, we'll say again that the explanation for why the statute of limitation was lapsed, if it was, has to come from Mr. Weiss.
My time is this, but let me ask one last question real quick here. Who decided that David Weiss would stay on as U.S. attorney?
Look, this had occurred before I came. Mr. Weiss had been kept on. I promised the...
no, I didn't say, you can walk all through that. I said, who decided? The White House decided,
Mr. Weiss,
right? They serve at the pleasure of the president, right?
Mr. Weiss was...
Joe Biden decided to keep David Weiss as U.S. attorney. You weren't sworn in until March. He was told he was going to stay on in February.
Expired.
Pretty fundamental question. Who decided David Weiss was going to stay as U.S. attorney in Delaware?
Mr.
Chairman,
Weiss
your
was...
time has
Mr.
expired.
Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, your time has expired.
I'm waiting for an answer, and then I'll yield.
Well, you asked the question after your time had expired already. Point of order.
Gentleman can respond, then I'll go to Ms. Jackson-Lee.
Mr. Weiss was the special U.S. attorney from the District of Delaware when I came on. He had been appointed by President Trump. I promised that he would be permitted to stay on for this investigation, and that is what happened.
Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from New York. Mr. Garland, did you consider, I just want to go back to this question, did you consider anyone else when David Weiss requested special counsel designation on August 8th?
No, Mr. Weiss asked to be made special counsel, and I did not consider an alternative. Of course, to have put in an alternative would have greatly disrupted an investigation that was already ongoing.
I want to be clear. He was the only one under consideration. It was either no special counsel, or if there was a special counsel, it was going to be the guy who presided over the investigation for the previous 5 years.
I thought about the possibility, what the consequences would be, both of not appointing him and trying to find somebody else at that time, but there was no other...
And you had no concerns. I mean, the whistleblowers have brought forward all kinds of concerns. Earlier, when someone brought those up, you said, well, those are allegations. I think they stand up well. They've been cross-examined for 4 hours by Democrats in the Oversight Committee. But there were 2 facts that can be questioned. 2 facts about the investigation of Hunter Biden. Fact number 1, they let the statute of limitations run. They let it expire. And fact number 2, the plea deal fell apart. So I just wanted to make clear that the guy who presided over all that was the only guy under consideration for special counsel designation. Is that right?
Mr. Weiss is a person known for high integrity, for great experience in the prosecutorial realm, and he was appointed by the president.
That's fine. You can say all that. I appreciate what you're saying there.
I have no doubts about his abilities in this area.
He was the only one under consideration.
The question was whether to appoint someone, and I thought, I will say, what the consequences would be of trying to switch horses in midstream, but I did not consider any other
Okay,
person.
on July 10th,
no.
he wrote Senator Graham, and he said, I've had discussions with departmental officials. He said, I haven't sought special counsel status, but I've had discussions with departmental officials. Who, and I don't know if this was asked earlier, who did he talk with then?
I'm sorry, you're talking about the letter that he sent to?
Senator Graham on July 10th.
Again, I'm not going to get into internal deliberations of the Justice Department.
Okay, fine. Is there one person, though, who's like the point person at the Justice Department for David Weiss as he now is functioning as a special counsel in this investigation?
Mr. Weiss is now subject to the special counsel regulations, which require urgent reporting under certain circumstances, require him to consult with numerous places within the Justice Department.
Fine, you're following the statute. God bless you. That's where it's supposed to happen. But you said there's reporting. Who does he report to?
Again, I'm not going to get into
Is
these.
it you?
I'm ultimately responsible.
Is it the DAG?
Mr. Weiss did not have to report to anybody. He was the supervisor and decision maker in these matters.
Okay. We have votes on the floor. We're going to have to take another break, Mr. Attorney General. We'll get back here as quick as we can, and we'll start with the Democrats.
Sure.
I yield the balance of my time to the chairman.
Gentlelady for yielding. Mr. Garland, in David Weiss's letter to Senator Graham on July 10th of this year, he says this, I was assured that I would be granted special counsel authority if it proved necessary, and this assurance came months before the October 7th, 2022 meeting referenced throughout the whistleblower's, allegations. How was that assurance given and who gave it?
I'm sorry, I think he was talking about 515 authority. Is that what you're, I'm reading the letter now. He's not talking about special counsel authority. It says that I was assured.
515 authority, okay.
Yeah.
Same difference.
Yeah.
Well, not same difference, but same fundamental question.
I understand your point, yeah.
He's making the point that he was assured that this was, he could get this status, and that status came, that assurance, came before October 7th, 2022. How was that assurance given and who gave it?
Yeah, I made that clear in my direction, and that was transmitted to him.
So you told him that
No,
back before October 7th that he would have?
I'm not going to get into exactly the deliberation of the department, but
There's three simple questions. How was it given? Who gave it? When was it done?
Yeah, I understand. I gave a direction from the beginning that he would be able to bring a case whenever, wherever he wanted to. That direction he heard, obviously, and he confirms that here.
I went a little over time, so I told the ranking member I'd extend to him a few seconds or minutes if he wanted to say a few more things.
Morning, Mr. Kiley.
I yield to the chair.
Mr. Kiley, the chair of the Judiciary Committee.
Oh, to the chair of the Judiciary Committee.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Kiley.
Thank the gentleman for yielding. Ms. Clark, who's Ava Edel?
Chairman, that is not a name that I'm familiar with.
Well, I'll try to familiarize you with her. She's an 87-year-old pro-life advocate who survived a communist concentration camp in Yugoslavia after World War II that you guys have charged under the FACE Act for praying and singing in front of an abortion clinic. Is that the best use of the Justice Department's time and energy?
As noted, the FACE Act has been is a law that this body passed in response to efforts to obstruct access to reproductive health clinics, threats of violence, acts of violence. We follow the facts and apply the law without fear or favor, Chairman.
Really? I think we've heard a lot of that today about how if you're pro-life, you get the full treatment. Just ask Ava Edel, 87-year-old concentration camp survivor. But if you're on the other side, after the Dobbs decision, it's a different issue. In spite of what you've said, that you apply it equally across the board. How about your decision to file a lawsuit against SpaceX? Can you talk to me about that?
Yes, Chairman.
Let me ask it this way first. Did Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter have anything to do with the Justice Department's decision to file that lawsuit against SpaceX?
The investigation into SpaceX was open during the last administration, and we filed an administrative action under the Immigration and Nationality Act, an important law passed by this body with bipartisan support and signed into law by President Reagan.
So what are you alleging that SpaceX did wrong?
In this case, we allege that the company is not compliant with the anti-discrimination provisions of the Immigration and Nationality Act. This is a law that has been—
Who are they discriminating against?
Here they are discriminating against people who have received refugee and asylum status by our federal courts under the INA.
They're discriminating against refugees and asylum seekers, is that
No,
right?
no, Chairman, against people who have received refugee status and asylum status by our federal courts and who enjoy equal standing under federal law to U.S. citizens and naturalized citizens. The law requires equal treatment of these individuals.
And you're saying that SpaceX did not hire, is that appropriate, did not hire enough refugees or people who've been granted asylum? Is that what you're asserting in the lawsuit?
And that they discourage those people from applying for any job, whether it's for a custodial position, office clerk, someone who works in a kitchen facility, all the way up through engineering.
So you're suing,
I
just want to cut to the chase. You're suing SpaceX because they hired too many Americans, too many citizens, not enough people who are refugees or people who've been granted asylum.
This investigation—
And you waited to sue. This investigation started 3 years ago. I know the facts. It started 3 years ago. And yet you bring the lawsuit after Mr. Musk purchases Twitter, now X. Is that right?
We apply the laws that this body gave us without fear or favor.
And Mr. Musk, his assertion is that they're dealing with national security type information at SpaceX, and that's why he's even posted this before you brought the lawsuit. He said this. That's why they focus on hiring people who have a green card or are American citizens. And you guys say this is something we need to go after SpaceX because they're not hiring enough Americans, and we need to charge Ava Edel, 87-year-old concentration camp survivor. That's what the Justice Department and the Biden administration needs to do. But oh, by the way, we don't know anything about Missouri v. Biden. We didn't weigh in on the issue where a governor of a state told the citizens, they're American citizens, you cannot exercise your Second Amendment rights contrary to the law, contrary to what the Supreme Court has said. And you're trying to tell us today that the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department is not political. Frankly, I find it almost laughable that you're making that argument because anyone with common sense and any objectivity can see you guys are definitely political. With that, I yield back and thank the gentleman who's left for yielding time.
Well, I thank the Judiciary Committee Chairman. I would like to ask unanimous consent to insert into the record a letter from Mr. Paul Teller, the Executive Director of Advancing American Freedom, to Attorney General Garland, Secretary Cardona, that is noting the significant spike in anti-Semitic vandalism, harassment, and violence across the United States, and asking the Department of Justice, Department of Education, who have expansive jurisdiction, particularly Civil Rights Division, over these matters, to ensure that they're following up on that is signed by numerous groups across the country. Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Clark, are you sure that you don't know anything about Missouri v. Biden? You don't know anything about that case?
Thank you for the opportunity to clarify. This is a case being handled by our Civil Division, and I assure you, Chairman, that the Justice Department—
Have you read the opinion?
The Justice Department is compliant.
No, I didn't ask that. Did you read the opinion, either from the Western District of Louisiana or the Fifth Circuit opinion?
I gleaned the ruling, but it's not a Civil Rights Division case.
Well, which is it? Because first of all, when Mr. Bishop asked, you said you didn't know one darn thing about it. Now you're saying you gleaned or you glanced or what?
I appreciate the opportunity to clarify. The Civil Division is handling this case, and the department is compliant with the court's
Well, First Amendment rights
injunction.
are pretty fundamental rights. That's something you don't think the Civil Rights Division should be involved in. This is censorship.
Absolutely, Chairman. The First
you're
Amendment
not?
is a bedrock principle of our democracy.
Well, let me go a little different route then. Do politics drive the decisions at the Justice Department today?
Politics have no place in the work of the Civil Rights Division.
Three
or
months
the
ago,
Justice
3 months
Department.
ago, the New Mexico governor announced a 30-day ban on citizens' right to carry a concealed firearm in Albuquerque and the county that Albuquerque sits in. What did the Justice Department do when the governor did that unconstitutional order? What did the DOJ do in response to that unconstitutional action from the governor of New Mexico?
I am generally aware of the matter that you are referring to, but gun control is not a core issue that we handle.
Second
in the
Amendment, a
Civil Rights
fundamental right
Division.
like the First Amendment, it's pretty important, isn't it?
These are very important issues to the department.
Well, tell me what the Justice Department did when this happened, when the governor imposed this unconstitutional ban.
I'm happy to bring your question back to my
You
colleagues.
don't know that one either.
The criminal division and the civil
You
division.
don't know about Missouri v. Biden. You don't know what the DOJ did in response to the governor of New Mexico's action. Well, here's what the county sheriff said. He held a press conference saying that this thing was unconstitutional, unenforceable, and incapable of stopping and curbing gun violence. The New Mexico Attorney General, who's a Democrat, said this thing will not have any impact on public safety and does not pass constitutional muster. So when the Democrat Attorney General of New Mexico said it doesn't fit the Constitution, but you guys at DOJ don't do a darn thing? Is that what you're telling me?
Politics have no place in the work of the Justice Department chairman, but
Are you aware of anything the Justice Department did to that unconstitutional order from the governor of New Mexico?
Not in the Civil Rights Division, Chairman, but I can certainly
Marauder,
bring your
you're an
question.
important person in the Justice Department. Did the Justice Department do anything?
Yes, we enforce the laws that Congress gave us, Chairman.
No, in this case, did the Justice Department do anything?
I will bring that question back to my
I'll give you the answer.
colleagues.
They didn't. They didn't file an amicus. They didn't put any statement of interest. They didn't do a darn thing, which gets back to the point I think Mr. McClintock was making earlier. It shows, I think, how political you are, because when Texas passed a pro-life bill on September 1st, 2021, 8 days later, the Department of Justice announces an investigation into that bill. Now, this is what amazes me. That's a bill that actually passed the state House, passed the state Senate, was signed by the governor, and you guys are in there contesting that 8 days later. But you have something in New Mexico, which is an obvious direct assault on the Second Amendment, and it's an order from the governor. It didn't go through the legislature. The governor does it, and the Department of Justice does nothing.
The Civil Rights Division is deeply committed to enforcing the laws that this body gave us and committed to standing up for the rights, the civil rights of all Americans, Chairman.
Well, you can say it, but based on some of your other answers, not knowing the first thing about Missouri v. Biden, not knowing what, if anything, was done, because nothing was actually done, relative to the governor's unconstitutional order regarding New Mexico citizens and residents and Americans' right, Second Amendment rights. This is why we're so darn concerned. I appreciate the chairman having this hearing. With that, I got 38 seconds. I'd be happy to yield to the gentleman from Arizona.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. And I just want to ask that.
I'll recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Bishop.
Ms. Clark, in the the Missouri versus Biden case in the district court, the court explained, quote, if the allegations made by the plaintiffs are true, the present case arguably involves the most massive attack on free speech in United States history, close quote. Court went on to find that the plaintiffs were reasonably likely to succeed on the merits at trial, entered a preliminary injunction. The Fifth Circuit has affirmed. The Supreme Court has taken jurisdiction of the case. Of course, that's all civil litigation. Is any criminal investigation or prosecution of the persons responsible for that activity in the FBI, CISA, and at the White House and their co-conspirators underway in the Civil Rights Division?
Congressman, I'm not familiar with this litigation, but happy to bring your question back.
Thank you. So let me just make sure I understand that. You are not aware of the Missouri versus Biden litigation that is currently being taken up by the United States Supreme Court. Is that correct?
Unfortunately, I'm not, Congressman.
Well, assuming that you're not aware of that, what reason would there be that the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department's leader is unaware of what United States District Court has described as the most massive attack on free speech in the United States history?
If you could share more of the facts, that could be helpful, Congressman.
Otherwise, you just don't know. Is that correct?
That's correct. Unfortunately, this does not appear to be a case that I'm familiar with.
Well, good enough. I'm going to yield the balance of my time to the chairman.
Is the gentleman from Ohio want to?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So I find that to be astounding. I do want to follow up on the line of questioning with the gentleman from California with respect to the FACE Act implementation, because Ms. Clark, you dismissed saying, well, I can't.
Whose time are we doing now?
Go ahead.
Mr. Bishop.
It's my time. I'll let the gentleman.
That's what I
I
was
may
looking
ask
for,
to
where we were
send to
going.
the gentleman from Ohio after you. But
I just wanted to point out that there have been at least 35 cases of the FACE Act being applied to pro-life groups and/or churches, or pro-life people that are anti-abortion in your tenure, not even counting 2021. That's the data from 2022 and 2023, versus the 4 that we can point to, the 1 that you point to in January. So the point, gentleman from California, I would just ask, you're in your possession of your hands. You had a FOIA request that was responded to from a left-leaning group, the Center for Investigative Reporting. We've been asking for a copy of that FOIA about the prosecution levels and the numbers from your office for a long time, I think for almost a year, and we've not been responded to. So will you commit to sharing that FOIA request and all of the data of FACE Act prosecutions, specifically under your watch and generally?
I can absolutely bring this back to the division's FOIA officials and ensure that you receive a timely response. Please know that the division is committed to even-handed enforcement of the FACE Act.
Even under your watch, it's at least 35 to 1 or 2. That is not even-handed. That's far from even-handed. And importantly, Mark Houck, who was targeted, had a raid of his home, prosecuted under this, was acquitted by a jury. Have you apologized to him on behalf of the Department of Justice for that grave violation of his civil rights, having his family have to watch him being raided at his home, and then he's acquitted by a federal jury? Have you apologized to him?
Well, we follow the facts and apply the law. That is our job, and we welcome opportunities to engage with other pro-life groups that may be experiencing threats or acts of violence.
The answer to that is no. Does the
reclaiming my time, I yield to the gentleman from Ohio, Madam Chairman.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I'm like, I think every member, at least on this side, but I would think every member, anyone watching, is just astounded that you are not familiar. The Assistant Attorney General for the Division of Civil Rights at the Justice Department is not familiar with a huge case, Missouri v. Biden, where in that case, I think it was 6 different federal agencies were found to be guilty of violating the First Amendment liberties of Americans, HHS, NIAID, FBI, DOJ, DHS, even the White House itself, and you are not familiar with that, is truly, frankly, I don't know what I think that's why the gentleman had time to yield back, because he didn't know what I don't know what we say. That is it's in front of the Supreme Court, and the head of Civil Rights Division doesn't know. That is scary. And if that doesn't in and of itself show that this Justice Department is political and doing things for political reasons, I do not know what does. I yield back, and I appreciate the gentleman's question.
I yield my time.
I think the gentleman from North Carolina and the gentleman from Ohio, the gentlelady from Vermont is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assistant Attorney General Clark, thanks so much for being here. And I wanted to start by just personally thanking the